What if the law couldn't protect you? The rain poured relentlessly over Hailton, North Carolina, a city teetering between its industrial past and the glossy facade of modernity. Streetlights along Calhoun Avenue blurred into glowing smears against the Water Street windshield. Kellen Voss gripped the wheel of his sleek black BMW M5, the engine purring like restrained thunder as he weaved through the slick, narrow streets at AT-34. Kellen carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had clawed his way to the top. Clean fade, sharp jawline, and a tailored suit that spoke of success. A Harvard Law graduate, he'd earned his reputation prosecuting high-profile cases across the Midwest. Now, though, he was starting fresh in Hailton, serving as district attorney for Hailton County, a job he hadn't fully wanted, but accepted nonetheless. Hailton was a city caught between old-world charm and modern ambition. The mix of historic brownstones and rising glass towers was striking. But for Kellen, it felt like he was being watched from every corner. A young black man driving a luxury BMW in a town where the air was thick with suspicion. He could feel the eyes on him. He wasn't welcomed here, at least not by everyone. He turned the jazz up on the stereo, Coltrane, soulful and defiant, its notes washing over him like a shield. He focused on the music, trying to drown out the feeling of being an outsider. It was only a matter of time before the tension that had been building in the back of his mind finally burst. The lights hit first, flashing red and blue in his rearview. The sirens wailed as a police van cut through the rain behind him, pulling up quickly with tires hissing against the wet pavement. Kellen's breath caught in his throat, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew the drill. He pulled over, parking beside a row of weathered brick shops with boarded-up windows. He kept his hands firmly on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. 3 officers spilled out of the van, their wet uniforms sticking to their bodies. The leader, Sergeant Clay Vaughan, a stocky man with a buzz cut, stepped forward, eyes narrowed, out of the car. Now Vaughan barked, his voice thick with authority. Kellen lowered the window an inch, his voice steady. "Is there a problem, officer?" Vaughan's lips curled into a sneer. "Nice car. Where'd you steal it from?" "I didn't steal it," Kellen replied, keeping his tone neutral. "It's mine. I'm reaching for my ID now." "No need for that," Vaughan snapped. He jerked open the door and grabbed Kellen by the arm, dragging him out onto the slick pavement. The rain immediately soaked through Kellen's suit, but he didn't flinch. "Hey." Kellen raised his hands, trying to keep the situation from escalating. "I'm not resisting. Just check my wallet." The 2 other officers, Reed, tall and wiry, and Miles, who was broad and silent, flanked Kellen. Reed's hand was already on his baton, eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and malice. "We know your type," Vaughan growled, his breath hot with coffee. "Flashing around in a BMW like this. Drug dealer? Runner?" Kellen kept his voice calm, but the word stung. "I'm a district attorney. You're making a mistake." Before Kellen could continue, Reed swung his baton into the driver's side window. The glass shattered, sending a spray of shards into the rain-soaked street. Kellen lunged forward instinctively, but Miles slammed him back into the side of the car, pinning him with brute strength. "You've got no cause for this," Kellen shouted, trying to push against Miles' grip. "No warrant, no reason." Vaughan's eyes darkened, his smirk widening as he stepped closer. "You look like trouble. That's reason enough." Without warning, Vaughan raised his baton and slammed it down onto the windshield. The sound of the impact cracked through the night air like a gunshot. Kellen's pulse quickened, but he stayed focused. "You're making a huge mistake," Kellen repeated, his voice laced with warning. Reed kicked at the back tire, sending the hubcap flying. He let out a low laugh. "Prove it, tough guy." At that moment, headlights sliced through the storm, their beam flashing across the street. A sleek Audi screeched to a stop beside them, and the car door flung open. A woman stepped out, her umbrella snapping open against the downpour. She moved with purpose, her voice cutting through the storm. "What the hell is going on here?" The officers froze. She was tall, with steel gray hair tied into a neat bun. Her tailored coat and badge marked her as an authority figure. Chief Inspector Marlene Wilks. She scanned the scene in one quick motion, her sharp eyes taking in the destroyed BMW, the rain-soaked DA, and the 3 officers standing frozen in place. "Ma'am," Vaughan stammered, straightening. "We stopped a suspect." Wilks didn't respond immediately. She stepped forward, grabbing Kellen's wallet from the gutter where it had been discarded. She flipped it open and read the name on the ID, her expression hardening. Kellen Voss, District Attorney, she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing. Our district attorney. Vaughn's face went pale. Reed dropped his baton, and Miles stepped back, his hands trembling. Kellen stood there, rain dripping from his clothes. His gaze locked on Wilks. She was a woman who didn't tolerate mistakes. He met her eyes with a silent nod. Get them away from me, Kellen said, his voice calm but with a sharp edge. I'll handle this. Wilks turned to the officers, her voice cool and commanding. Get them out of my sight. We'll deal with this tomorrow. The air in the interrogation room of Hailton County Precinct felt heavy, thick with unspoken tension. Kellen Voss, the newly appointed district attorney of Hailton, sat across from three officers, Sergeant Clay Vaughan, Officer Reed, and Officer Miles. The months of community outreach, the weight of their actions, and the uneasy silence between them all hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Chief Inspector Marlene Wilks stood beside Kellen, her arms folded tightly across her chest, her sharp eyes scanning the officers as if looking for cracks in their armor. The room was eerily still as the clock ticked slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. Kellen's voice broke the silence, steady and firm, but with an edge that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much injustice. 6 months, Kellen said. You'll do community outreach, ride with social workers, mentor kids in immigrant neighborhoods, face the people you've been judging. You'll see what I've seen, and then we'll talk about who you really are. Sergeant Vaughan scoffed, clearly not impressed, his expression hard and unyielding. You think we're just going to play nice with them? His voice was laced with disbelief. Shut it, Vaughan, Wilkes snapped, her tone sharp, cutting through the tension like a knife. He's offering you a lifeline. Take it, or I'll personally ensure you never wear a badge again. Bram, the usually quiet officer, spoke up for the first time, his voice low, but carrying a hint of frustration. Why not just lock us up? We've already been caught red-handed. Kellen's gaze met Bram's, unwavering. Because I've been where you put me last night. Profiled, harassed, underestimated. I could have let that make me bitter, but instead, I'm here, giving you a chance to figure out why you're not. The ball is in your court. The words hit hard, lingering in the air like a challenge. The room grew quieter. Vaughan's gaze dropped to the table, his expression unreadable, as Reed fidgeted with his hands, clearly uncomfortable. Miles remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. Kellen stood, his voice steady, but there was an undeniable power in his words. Think it over. You've got until the end of the day. Over the next few weeks, the officers begrudgingly began their assigned outreach. Kellen, from his office, watched closely as they moved through the tasks, each one a test of character. Vaughan, the toughest of the three, was assigned to a Somali outreach program. His usual scowl softened as he interacted with the children, their endless questions and curiosity breaking through his hardened exterior. The constant barrage of inquiries forced him to lower his guard, even if just a little. Reed, who had always carried himself with an air of superiority, was sent to tutor teenagers at a Surinamese community center. The sharp wit and intelligence of the kids there quickly chipped away at his bravado, leaving him frustrated but also strangely humbled. It was a challenge he hadn't anticipated, one that made him rethink his assumptions. Miles, the silent giant, worked at a shelter, serving meals to families he had once eyed with suspicion. His hands were steady as he worked, his silence no longer a tool for intimidation, but a shield against the guilt he began to feel. It was clear he was struggling with his own demons. As the weeks passed, Kellen observed the subtle changes. Vaughan laughed at a soccer game with a young boy, a rare, genuine smile slipping through his usually rigid expression. Reed, when a teenager questioned his past, admitted to having misjudged him. Miles, after a long day at the shelter, wrote a letter to a resident apologizing for past stops. These were small victories, moments that showed change could be possible. But there were also signs of resistance. Vaughan muttered complaints under his breath. Reed rolled his eyes at the kids' antics, and Miles remained distant, his silence often more telling than words. Kellen wrestled with the decision he had made. He could have destroyed their careers, made an example of them for their past actions. But he chose a different path, a risk that came from his own past. His BMW, now repaired but still bearing the scars of that fateful night, sat in the garage. It was a constant reminder of the tension, of the decision he had made to give these officers a second chance. 6 months later, the officers returned to the precinct for their final assessment. They walked into the room, noticeably changed. They were thinner, less certain of themselves, their confidence and bravado shattered. Their faces were drawn, tired. The weight of their actions seemed to have finally caught up with them. Kellen sat across from them, Wilks by his side, her gaze fixed on the three men as if waiting for them to prove themselves. The silence was palpable. "Well," Kellen asked, his voice steady, but carrying a quiet authority. "What did you learn?" Vorn cleared his throat, his earlier arrogance completely gone. I got it wrong. About you. About them. Doesn't fix what I did, but I see it now." There was no bravado in his voice, no dismissive tone. Just raw honesty. Reed leaned back in his chair, his usual cocky demeanor replaced by a half-smirk. "Some of those kids, they're smarter than me. Still don't like you, but I get why you're here. I get it now." Miles, who had remained silent throughout most of the meeting, finally spoke up, his voice low but sincere. "I'm sorry. For that night. For before. I don't know if I'm different yet, but I'm trying." He met Kellen's gaze, and for the first time, there was something in his eyes, guilt, regret, and perhaps a hint of something more. Kellen nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's all I asked. You've got your records cleared, suspensions lifted. But this isn't over. Racism isn't a switch you flip. It's a fight. Every day. You slip again, and I'll know." Wilks stepped forward, her voice cold and authoritative. "Prove him right." The officers stood up, their faces somber, as they filed out of the room. The weight of their past actions hung over them, but Kellen had given them a chance. Now it was up to them to decide whether they would truly change or fall back into the same old patterns. Today, as the door closed behind them, Kellen remained seated, lost in thought. Outside, the rain had stopped and the sky was clearing. The canals of Hailton reflected the blue sky, the calm water belying the storm that had once raged within the city's heart. That Kellen's thoughts were heavy. He had planted the seed of change, but he knew that change was never guaranteed. He wondered if these men would rise above their shadows, or if they would fall back into the same darkness. He didn't know. But for now he realized that was okay. He had given them the opportunity. Now, it was up to them to make the right choice.